Every 3 years, something amazing happens. The world is introduced to a new film that's been written, directed, and oftentimes produced by Christopher Nolan. Now, this trend mainly started in the early 2000s when Nolan made his major debut as director through Batman Begins, and he continued to surprise his audience with following films like Inception, Interstellar, Dunkirk, and now, this year's offering, Tenet. Last week at 8 o'clock p.m., I walked into the movie theater with the anticipation that basically every die-hard Christopher Nolan fan feels. But leaving that theater 150 minutes later forced me into a pretty brutal realization. Tenet missed its mark, and not even by a little bit. But wait, this movie has amazing reviews, it's directed by Christopher Nolan, and has an outstanding cast, so how could I dislike it? Well, let me explain. The best way I can describe this movie is with a comparison. So imagine you walk into your first day of class as a freshman in college, but instead of walking into your college algebra prerequisite course you signed up for, you accidentally joined an advanced calculus class packed with aspiring analysts and engineers. And, since you don't want to embarrass yourself, you stick around for this class. See, the problem is, you'd have no clue what anyone was talking about. It's not that you don't understand anything about the equations they're solving. I mean, you'd know what numbers are, you've used those before, and you know the basic structure of numerical symbols, and you remember most of what you learned from high school. But that's it. You don't know why the numbers are being arranged and composed the way they are. You don't even recognize a ton of the foreign symbols used for the equations, but most of all, you don't even know what they're trying to calculate. Are they trying to find the mass of an object, or the dimensions of one, or even the weight and motion? See, the issue is nobody took the time to explain to you what they all know, simply because you're in the wrong class. You can't expect to understand what the structure of their equations mean if you don't even know what they're trying to find, what any of it's even supposed to add up to. And honestly, that is Tenet. Now, it's not that the movie was lazily composed or that nobody seemed to put any effort into it. On the contrary, this may be one of the most complicated productions I've ever watched unravel before my eyes, so much so that none of it truly made any sense to me. See, the whole movie constantly struggles to keep hand-feeding us information before we can even comprehend or digest the last dose they gave us. And by that I mean sometimes you literally can't even hear what information they give you, usually because of the sound design or the mumbled dialogue. Of course, you could argue that exactly this kind of thing is what makes Christopher Nolan so unique in this industry today. And while that's true to an extent, there's something that separates the rest of his projects from this one. See, with his previous movies like Interstellar and Inception, he strikes a perfect balance of holding new information out in front of you until you barely grasp the idea enough to grab a hold of it and comprehend it. And then once you've done that, there's something new hanging in front of you, ready to be grabbed when you are ready. We see this in Inception as each character gradually takes a step deeper and deeper into further layers of the dream state until they eventually arrive in limbo. We also see this in Interstellar as characters actually take the time to explain the physics and consequences of traveling to an interdimensional territory. But whether you stay caught up with it or not, it always gives you enough time to digest it, even if barely enough. Tenet, on the other hand, constantly hangs new information in front of you so far outside of your reach that I literally spent the first 40 minutes non-stop thinking about what I was watching until my head hurt and I gave up. That was the sad part, is it made me give up. At some point, I accepted that the information was so far out of reach and just getting further that I gave up and I stopped trying. Because at the end of the day, I didn't even know what we were calculating or why. The point is, I was working so hard the entire movie to understand what the movie was trying to tell me and the ideas it was trying to explain that I simply couldn't enjoy it. It had too much to share with us without an effective way to show or tell us what exactly it was trying to say. I mean, if you miss one line in the entire movie, you're at risk of losing track of the entire plot and oftentimes its characters. And honestly, that just shouldn't get a free pass, no matter who directed it. But as much as that put a damper on my whole experience watching this movie, it actually isn't the real reason it missed the mark so hard for me. The true gap that I saw in Tenet that separated itself from every other Christopher Nolan movie isn't actually something I saw at all. As a matter of fact, it was something I felt, or I should say something I didn't feel. But hold up, before I explain any of that, I'd rather show you. This following scene is from Interstellar, Nolan's 2014 sci-fi film that most of you probably remember. We watch this moment after our main character, a father, spends the entire movie trying to make it back to his once young daughter.
You told him I like farming.
I know. People didn't believe me. They thought that I was doing it all myself. But I knew who it was. Nobody believed me. But I knew you'd come back.
How?
Because my dad promised me.
Without explaining anything about this movie, you can feel something tangible here. Something raw. But this same feeling is reflected in this climatic scene in Inception when our main character, a husband, has come to grips with his wife's death and has to let her go.
You remember when you asked me to marry you?
Yes.
You said you dreamt that we'd grow old together.
But we did. We did, you don't remember. I miss you more than I can bear, but we had our time together. And I have to let you go. I have to let you go.
This raw moment that we experience isn't just present in these two movies, but is actually reflected in one way or another throughout almost every other Christopher Nolan film. In The Dark Knight, we watch Batman have to choose between saving the love of his life or the city's righteous icon. In The Dark Knight Rises, we experience Bruce Wayne overcome his fears and weaknesses by escaping the underground prison in Gotham. Dunkirk, Batman Begins, and so on and so on. What this represents, why it feels so heavy in our hearts when we watch it, is the payoff. We spend an entire movie following these characters through complex struggles and an intricate plot. We learn bits and pieces about these people and learn what ties them so closely to the plot Christopher Nolan has given us, until we experience that payoff. A moment or two in the movie where these characters experience something heartbreaking or triumphant. It tells us everything we've wanted to know about a character, simply by how it makes us feel when he or she loses or wins everything. The reason these intricate ideas and plots work so well in Christopher Nolan's movies is because he always took the time, just a brief moment, to stop everything, all the set pieces and all the exposition, simply to remind us what actually matters in his movies and in our own lives. He always rewarded our thoughts and our emotional investment with the payoff. So what I'm trying to say is that somehow, for some reason, Tenet missed this entirely. It got so deeply lost in its own clever ideas that it forgot why it existed. It stood in front of a class of freshman college students and expected everyone in the class to understand advanced calculus. But whenever someone wanted to ask a question, just out of confusion, there was no time made to answer that question or help its audience to understand what exactly it was trying to say. Tenet asks everyone to follow its characters for 2.5 hours, just for us to realize at the end that these characters were ultimately a means to demonstrate an idea, a concept, a plot. Simply put, there is no emotional payoff. There isn't a moment in the movie that takes the time to stop and truly remind us why we're supposed to care about these fictional people. By the time Tenet decided to tell me exactly what I was calculating and what the equation is for, I was so busy trying to understand the unfamiliar mathematical symbols along the way that the big twist, the big result at the end, didn't really mean anything. I guess it's just too bad that this college course couldn't teach its material a little more comprehensively, because in this case, there isn't any prerequisite course you can take before you sit down to watch Tenet.